when 12-year-old Sophie Martinez pressed her bruised face against a grimy warehouse window at 3:47 a.m., screaming silently for help. She never imagined her saviors would arrive on roaring Harleys, covered in tattoos and leather. What those 5 bikers did next wouldn't just save her life. It would destroy the trafficking ring that had terrorized 3 states for 7 years and deliver the kind of justice the courts never could. The Desert Demons Motorcycle Club wasn't your typical biker gang. Led by Marcus "Hammer" Davidson, a former Army Ranger with a Purple Heart and a bone-deep hatred for anyone who preyed on the innocent, the club had earned its reputation the hard way. They ran a legitimate security business by day and rode the highways by night. But what most people didn't know was their real mission: finding the lost, protecting the vulnerable, and when necessary, making predators disappear. It was a scorching August night in the Arizona desert, the kind where the asphalt stays hot enough to fry an egg even after midnight. Hammer and his crew, 4 brothers bonded by blood, ink, and shared trauma, were returning from a charity run in Tucson when fate intervened. They'd raised $15,000 for a children's hospital, posing for pictures with kids, playing the role of friendly giants. But underneath those smiles, each man carried scars that ran deeper than their tattoos. Hammer pulled his jet-black Road King into the parking lot of an abandoned industrial complex just outside Phoenix. The building loomed in the darkness, a relic from the 1970s when this area was booming with manufacturing jobs. Now it was just another forgotten corpse of the American dream, covered in graffiti and surrounded by chain-link fences with holes cut in them by homeless people and drug addicts. "We're stopping here?" Tommy Reaper Collins asked, his voice rough from years of smoking and shouting over engine noise. His vest bore patches from Vietnam, even though he'd been too young to serve. His father's patches, earned in blood and passed down as a sacred inheritance. Hammer's gut was twisting. He'd learned to trust that feeling in Fallujah, where ignoring your instincts meant coming home in a box. "Something's wrong here. I can feel it." The crew dismounted. 5 massive men, average height 6'2", average weight 220, all muscle and bad intentions if you crossed them wrong. There was Reaper, the demolitions expert who'd lost his daughter to a drunk driver and never fully recovered. Big Lou Martinez, 300 pounds of protective fury, who'd spent 10 years as a prison guard before joining the club. Snake Williams, the quiet one with dead eyes, who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan and come back with demons he couldn't shake. And finally, there was Preacher, real name Daniel Rodriguez, who got his nickname because he quoted scripture before every fight and believed God had a special place in hell for people who hurt children. Hammer held up his fist, the signal to stop and listen. The desert night was alive with sounds: coyotes in the distance, the buzz of cicadas, the occasional truck on the distant highway. But there was something else, a faint, rhythmic thumping, like someone hitting metal. "You hear that?" Snake whispered. His hearing was supernatural, a gift from years of night patrols, where the difference between life and death was noticing the sound of a safety clicking off in the dark. They moved as one unit, spreading out in tactical formation without a word. Years of riding together had created a silent language, a understanding that went deeper than speech. Hammer took point, moving toward the largest warehouse building. The thumping grew louder. That's when he saw her. Through a cracked window on the 2nd floor, barely visible in the moonlight, a small face appeared. Even from 50 yards away, Hammer could see the terror in her eyes. She was banging on the window with what looked like a metal pipe, the sound they'd heard from the road. When she saw him looking at her, she stopped. For a moment, everything froze. Then her mouth opened, and even though no sound reached him, Hammer could read her lips perfectly. "Help me, please. Help me." His blood turned to ice water, then to liquid fire. Every instinct screamed at him. Every memory of his own daughter, safe at home with his ex-wife, flashed through his mind. Every story he'd heard about trafficking, about the monsters who stole innocence and sold it to the highest bidder, roared in his ears. "We got a situation," Hammer said quietly into his radio. "All units converge on the main building. We're going in hot. What are we looking at?" Big Lou's voice crackled back. "Kidnapped kid, second floor. Unknown number of hostiles. This is a rescue operation. Rules of engagement are: protect the kid first. Ask questions never." The 5 bikers moved with the precision of a military unit because that's exactly what they'd been trained as. Hammer had served with Snake in the Rangers. Reaper had done Black Ops work that he still couldn't talk about. Big Lou had been a tactical response officer. Preacher had been a chaplain's assistant who'd seen more combat than most infantry. They weren't just bikers. They were warriors who'd found a new war to fight. The main entrance was chained shut, but Big Lou made short work of it with bolt cutters from his saddlebag. The chain hit the ground with a crash that echoed through the empty parking lot. They burst through the door into darkness so complete it was like diving into ink. "Flashlights up." Hammer commanded, "Clear and sweep. Find that girl." The warehouse was a maze of corridors and rooms, most of them filled with abandoned machinery and rat droppings. But as they moved deeper, the smell changed. Fresh cigarette smoke, fast food wrappers that weren't covered in dust. Someone had been here recently. Someone was still here. Movement. Top of the stairs. Snake hissed. They looked up. At the top of a metal staircase, a man stood silhouetted against a dim light. He was holding a shotgun, but his stance was sloppy, like he'd never actually used it in a real fight. When he saw the 5 bikers below, their flashlights creating a wall of light, he froze. "Drop it," Hammer said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "Drop the weapon and step aside, and maybe you walk out of here with all your teeth." The man's hand shook. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of face that had probably been good-looking before drugs and bad choices carved it into a skull. "I don't know who you think you are, but you need to leave. Now. This is private property." "We know what you're doing here," Preacher said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "We know about the girl. We know about the others. And brother, your time is up." The man's eyes widened. He'd been expecting cops, expecting a tactical team with warrants and protocols. He wasn't expecting 5 massive bikers who looked like they'd ridden straight out of a nightmare, ready to dispense their own brand of justice. His finger tightened on the trigger. Snake's knife was already in the air before the man could fire. It wasn't a killing throw. Snake never killed unless he had to. The blade buried itself in the man's shoulder, and the shotgun clattered down the stairs as he screamed and fell backward. "Move! Move! Move!" Hammer shouted, and they charged up the stairs like a tsunami of leather and fury. At the top, they found a hallway with 4 doors. 3 were open, revealing empty rooms. The 4th was reinforced with a deadbolt and a padlock. The sound of crying came from behind it. Big Lou didn't hesitate. He stepped back and kicked the door, with 300 pounds of force behind it. The frame splintered. The second kick tore the door off its hinges entirely. Inside, the scene was worse than any of them had imagined. Sophie Martinez sat in the corner, chained to a radiator by her ankle. She was wearing the same clothes she'd been kidnapped in 3 weeks ago. Her face was bruised, her lips split, her eyes hollow with trauma. But when she saw the bikers burst in, something flickered in those eyes. Not fear, hope. Behind her, 2 other girls huddled together. One looked about 15, the other maybe 16. Both were in similar conditions. All 3 had been missing from different cities across the Southwest. All 3 had been listed on the FBI's trafficking database. Hammer dropped to one knee in front of Sophie, making himself smaller, less threatening. His voice became soft, the voice he used with his own daughter. "Hey there, sweetheart. My name's Marcus, but my friends call me Hammer. We're here to get you out, all of you. You're safe now, I promise." Sophie's lip trembled. "The man, he went to get more people. He said if anyone came, he'd kill us." "How many men?" Hammer asked gently. She held up 3 fingers, then 4. "I don't know. They change. Different people come. But the boss, he's the worst one. He has a gun, a big one. He said we're going to California tomorrow, to be sold." The words hit Hammer like a sledgehammer to the chest. Sold. These children were being sold like livestock. The rage that filled him was cold and focused, the kind that made men dangerous. "Reaper, get these chains off. Big Lou, secure the stairs. Snake, Preacher, with me. We're hunting." "But boss, what about calling the cops?" Reaper asked, even though he already knew the answer. Hammer's eyes were black holes. "We are the cops tonight. These bastards don't get lawyers and trials. They get us." While Reaper worked on freeing the girls with lockpicks that would have made a master thief jealous, Hammer led Snake and Preacher back down the hallway. The wounded man from the stairs was gone, leaving a trail of blood like breadcrumbs. They followed it deeper into the warehouse, into sections that had clearly been converted into something evil. One room had mattresses on the floor and chains bolted to the walls. Another had video equipment and lighting. A third had a desk covered in passports, IDs, and paperwork showing transactions. This wasn't just a holding facility. This was a full operation. The blood trail led to a loading dock in the back of the building. Outside, they heard an engine starting. Hammer burst through the door just in time to see a black SUV peeling out of the parking lot, spraying gravel. "They're running," Snake said. "Let them run," Hammer replied, pulling out his phone. "I got the plate number, and I know some people who can make sure they never stop running. But more importantly, we got what we came for. Those girls are safe." They returned to find the girls freed, wrapped in the bikers' leather jackets, being given water and granola bars from their saddlebags. Sophie looked up at Hammer with eyes that had seen too much, but were finally starting to believe in hope again. "You really came for us," she whispered. "Always," Hammer said. "When we got that call about suspicious activity at this location, we couldn't ignore it. And sweetheart, you saved yourself by banging on that window. You're the bravest person I've ever met." The call he mentioned was from an anonymous tip that had come through the club's secret hotline, the one they advertised in truck stops and rest areas across the Southwest. Someone had seen girls being moved into this warehouse. Someone had cared enough to call, and the desert demons had responded like they always did, with overwhelming force and zero tolerance. 30 minutes later, the FBI arrived in a convoy of black vehicles, led by Agent Sarah Chen, a woman who'd been working human trafficking cases for 12 years and had an understanding with certain motorcycle clubs. They operated in the gray areas where the law couldn't reach, and while she'd never officially condoned their methods, she couldn't deny their results. "You found them," she said, looking at the 3 girls being treated by paramedics, "just like you found the Henderson kids last year, and the Martinez boy before that. You know I have to ask how you keep doing this." Hammer shrugged. "We ride, we listen, we pay attention, and when we see something wrong, we make it right. That's the code." Agent Chen nodded. The wounded suspect from the stairs was in custody, singing like a canary about his partners, about the network, about everything. The blood trail led us to his phone, and we've already made 3 more arrests tonight based on his contacts. This ring has been operating for 7 years. You just took down the whole operation in one night. "Good," Preacher said. "Then our work here is done." But it wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Over the next 72 hours, the dominoes fell like an avalanche. The wounded man, desperate to cut a deal, gave up names, locations, routes. The FBI raided 6 more locations across Arizona, Nevada, and California. They recovered 14 more victims and arrested 23 traffickers. The boss that Sophie mentioned, a man named Victor Castellanos, was found trying to cross into Mexico. He never made it. His car went off a desert road in the middle of the night, rolled 4 times, and burst into flames. The official report said mechanical failure. The unofficial truth was that certain bikers had very long memories and connections that ran deeper than anyone suspected. Sophie's parents, who'd been living in a nightmare for 3 weeks, got the call they'd been praying for. Their daughter was alive, traumatized, but alive. Safe. Coming home. When Sophie was released from the hospital after a week of treatment and evaluation, the desert demons showed up at her house. Not in their cuts, not on their bikes, but in normal clothes, looking like any other group of concerned citizens. They brought gifts, a new teddy bear, books, a tablet loaded with movies and games. But more importantly, they brought a promise. "We're going to check on you," Hammer told Sophie and her parents. "Not every day, not in a creepy way, but we're going to make sure you're okay, that you feel safe, and if you ever need anything, anything at all, you call this number, day or night, we'll be there." Sophie's father, a mechanic named Robert, who'd spent 3 weeks feeling completely helpless, shook Hammer's hand with tears streaming down his face. "You didn't just save my daughter, you saved my whole family. I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Hammer said, "by raising a daughter brave enough to fight for herself. She's a warrior, Mr. Martinez, just like you. But the story doesn't end with a happy reunion and gratitude, because the kind of evil that the desert demons fought doesn't just disappear. It adapts. It hides. It waits for another opportunity." 2 months after the rescue, Sophie was in therapy 3 times a week, slowly rebuilding her shattered sense of safety. Her parents had installed a new security system, so she didn't leave the house without one of them. She was homeschooled now, unable to face the crowds at her middle school. The physical wounds had healed, but the psychological ones would take years. One night, Sophie woke up screaming from a nightmare. She dreamed that the man from the warehouse had found her again, that he was outside her window, waiting. Her parents rushed in, held her, tried to calm her down, but nothing worked. Finally, her mother called the number Hammer had given them. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? 20 minutes later, 5 motorcycles pulled up in front of the Martinez house. The neighbors peeked through their curtains, alarmed at first, but then they remembered the news stories. The bikers who'd saved those girls. The desert demons were heroes now, even if they looked like trouble. Hammer knocked gently on the door. Robert answered, looking exhausted and grateful at the same time. She won't stop crying. She's terrified he's coming back. Hammer walked into Sophie's room. She was curled up in bed, shaking. When she saw him, something in her face relaxed just slightly. "Hey there, warrior princess," Hammer said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I heard you had a rough night." Sophie nodded, unable to speak through her tears. "Listen to me very carefully," Hammer said, his voice firm but kind. "The man who hurt you is never coming back. Do you know why? Because he's gone. Not in jail. Gone. As in, the desert has a way of swallowing up people who do evil things. And even if by some miracle he survived, he'd have to get through me and my brothers first. And sweetheart, that's not going to happen." Sophie's eyes widened. "You mean he's dead?" "I mean you're safe," Hammer said. "And that's all that matters. But I'm going to teach you something that helped me when I came back from war and had nightmares. When you're scared, you think about the people who love you. You think about how strong you are. You survived something that would break most adults. You're not a victim. You're a survivor. Say it with me. I'm a survivor." Sophie whispered it first, then said it louder. "I'm a survivor." "Louder," Hammer encouraged. "I'm a survivor," Sophie shouted, and something broke inside her. The tears that came now weren't tears of fear, but tears of release. Hammer stayed for 2 hours that night, telling Sophie stories about his own daughter, about his time in the military, about overcoming fear. The other bikers sat in the living room with Robert and Sophie's mother, Maria, drinking coffee and providing the kind of presents that made a family feel protected. When they finally left, Sophie was asleep, really asleep, for the first time in weeks. But Hammer's work wasn't done, because 3 members of Victor Castellanos' trafficking ring had escaped the initial raids. 3 men who'd been smart enough to disappear into the wind when everything fell apart. 3 men whose names appeared on a very special list that the desert demons kept locked in a safe at their clubhouse. Over the next 6 months, the desert demons went hunting. The first man, an enforcer named Miguel Santos, who'd been responsible for keeping the girls compliant through threats and violence, was found in a cheap motel in Albuquerque. He'd been drinking heavily, trying to forget what he'd done. He woke up to find 5 bikers standing around his bed. "Time to answer for your sins," preacher said. Miguel tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Snake's hand closed around his throat. They dragged him out to the desert, to a place where the coyotes would make sure nothing was ever found. What happened that night in the darkness would never be spoken of. But Miguel Santos never hurt another child. The second man, a recruiter named Danny Ortiz, who'd posed as a talent scout to lure girls from shopping malls and bus stations, was working at a car wash in Las Vegas. He thought he was safe, lost in the crowds and bright lights. He was wrong. Big Lou walked into the car wash at closing time. Ortiz recognized him immediately, and his face went white. "Please," Ortiz begged. "I'll testify. I'll tell the FBI everything. Just don't hurt me." Big Lou's face was carved from stone. "You had your chance to testify. You ran instead. And every day you were free, you were a threat to every kid in this city. What happened to Ortiz was simpler. He disappeared on his way home from work. His car was found abandoned near Lake Mead. The police investigated it as a possible drowning. No body was ever recovered. The third man was different. His name was James Whitmore, and he wasn't just muscle or a recruiter. He was the money man, the accountant who'd handled the financial side of the operation. He'd taken the trafficking proceeds and laundered them through legitimate businesses. He'd made millions while children suffered. And unlike the others, Whitmore had resources, security, lawyers. He'd fled to a compound in rural Montana, surrounded himself with armed guards, and dared anyone to come for him. The desert demons accepted his dare. They spent 3 weeks planning the operation like a military strike. Snake did reconnaissance, watching the compound through binoculars from a ridge 2 miles away, mapping out patrol patterns and security weak points. Reaper studied the compound's electrical system, finding the vulnerable points. Big Lou reached out to contacts in the Montana biker community, getting intel on Whitmore's routine. On a moonless night in October, 1 year to the day after Sophie's rescue, the desert demons struck. They cut the power first. The compound went dark. The guards scrambled, thinking it was just a blown transformer. By the time they realized it was an attack, Snake and Preacher were already inside, moving through the darkness like ghosts. They found Whitmore in his panic room, surrounded by monitors and firearms, watching his security cameras flicker and die one by one. When the door to his sanctuary was torn off its hinges by Big Lou's breaching charges, Whitmore found himself staring at 5 men who looked like death incarnate. "You can't do this," Whitmore stammered. "I have lawyers. I have rights. You're not the law." Hammer stepped forward, his face illuminated by the red emergency lights. "You're right. We're not the law. We're something the law can't be. We're justice. What happened in that panic room stayed in that panic room. But when the desert demons rode away 2 hours later, James Whitmore was no longer a threat to anyone. The compound's security footage showed nothing. The guards reported that they'd lost track of their boss during the power outage. By the time the Montana police arrived, the only evidence was Whitmore's confession, written in his own shaking hand, detailing every crime, every victim, every dollar of blood money. The document was found along with detailed financial records that would help prosecutors shut down the entire network permanently. Whitmore himself was found 3 days later in a Mexican jail, having turned himself in, babbling about demons on motorcycles who'd showed him what hell looked like. He pled guilty to all charges and is currently serving 6 consecutive life sentences in a maximum security facility where child traffickers don't last long. 2 years after that night in the warehouse, Sophie Martinez stood on a stage at her high school graduation. She'd not only recovered, but thrived, becoming an advocate for trafficking victims and planning to study criminal justice in college. In the audience, sitting in the back row in their leather cuts, were 5 bikers who'd come to watch their warrior princess graduate. When Sophie gave her valedictorian speech, she talked about courage, about the people who'd saved her life, about how sometimes angels wear leather and ride Harleys. The desert demons never sought fame or recognition. They refused interviews. They declined awards. But in truck stops and rest areas across the Southwest, their reputation grew. A phone number written on bathroom walls, a promise whispered among the desperate. If you need help, call the demons. They'll come. They always come. Sophie visits the clubhouse once a month now, She brings homework, talks about college applications, and laughs with these massive men who treat her like precious cargo. She's learned to ride her own motorcycle, a smaller bike that Hammer rebuilt for her. She wears her own vest now, not as a member, but as family. Because that's what the desert demons really are. Not a biker gang, not vigilantes. They're a family that protects those who can't protect themselves. They're warriors who fight in the shadows so others can live in the light. And somewhere out there, right now, another predator is hunting. Another child is in danger. Another desperate message is being pressed against a window. But as long as the desert demons ride, as long as men like Hammer and his brothers patrol these highways, there's hope. Because when evil comes calling, these bikers don't hesitate. They never have. They never will. The message is simple. You don't have to wear a badge to be a hero. You don't have to follow the rules to do what's right. Sometimes justice comes on two wheels with the roar of a Harley engine. Sometimes the scariest looking people are the ones who'll fight hardest to protect the innocent. If this story moved you, if you believe that real heroes ride motorcycles and that some debts can only be paid in blood and justice, then share Sophie's story. Share the message that there are still warriors out there protecting the vulnerable. Share the truth that sometimes the justice system fails, but real justice never does. The desert demons are real. Their mission is real. And the next time you see bikers on the highway, remember, they might be the only thing standing between a predator and their next victim. Don't judge them by their leather. Judge them by their actions. And if you ever need help, remember, there are people who ride the night, hunting monsters. All you have to do is ask. Stay safe out there. And remember, not all heroes wear capes. Some wear cuts and ride into hell itself to save the innocent. That's the desert demon's way. That's justice on two wheels. That's what brotherhood really means.